All of these warnings, of course, bring us to FEMA Administrator Brock Long, joining me now from the agency's headquarters in Washington. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you and all of your teams. What are your warnings, and which model do you think is the most likely right now?
You know, I don't really pay attention to the models.
Okay.
I focus on the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center that compensates for all of them. Each one of those models measures different elements of the atmosphere and different things. So, you know, I have great confidence in the National Hurricane Center's ability to forecast this, and they're doing a great job. You know, the citizens in North and South Carolina have had many days notice that this storm is coming. And it's going to make landfall as a major hurricane. And major hurricanes cause the most amount of damage. They cause the most loss of life. And this is nothing to be played with. Today, you know, the citizens along the coast that are in the evacuation warning areas need to get out. They're running out of time to do so. The elements are going to start impacting tonight and tomorrow. And anybody that stays behind, as Al Roker said, you know, you're putting your own life in danger. There is no expectation that first responders will come in and get you if you decide not to go. And the thing about storm surge with 13 feet of water, and that's the ocean rising above mean sea level, with wave action on top of that 13 feet, anybody that sticks around that experiences that really doesn't live to tell about it. So it's the unforgiving hazard. That
is as dire a warning as you could have. Now, the issues that face FEMA are many, including a GAO report, recent report, saying that during last year's hurricane-related deployments, 54% of FEMA employees were not fully qualified for the jobs that they were holding. Has that changed in the last year?
Well, unfortunately, that's being taken way out of context. We have what's called the National Qualification System, and the term qualified. We've never thrown anybody unqualified in emergency management. These guys are dedicated around the block. But, for example, in the National Qualification System, there may be a qualification to be a PIO, Public Information Officer. I am not trained as a PIO. I'm not qualified as a PIO, but yet I'm sitting in front of you doing an interview. So that term is being taken out. But here's what is important about the GAO. The GAO report lines up very well with the very open and honest after-action report that we most recently put forward. But what's most important in that GAO report, as I understand, is, look, they discuss, at the bottom line, this is a partnership. There has to be strong emergency management, government capability at all levels of government for response and recovery to go well. And that's what we're focused on. This is a team effort. You know, we've got strong leadership in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And, you know, the response and recovery will be better served as a result. Anytime you have diminished capacity, anytime you've let your infrastructure rot and decay over periods of time, the bottom line is that the response is not going to go well. So that's what America learned. That's what the GAO report says, along with our open and honest AAR.
Well, you were in the Oval Office yesterday when President Trump, frankly, shocked a lot of people, calling Puerto Rico efforts last year an unsung success. This after this recent report, the new study saying that nearly 3,000 people were killed, American citizens, not 64 people as was originally estimated by the government. How can we call Puerto Rico an unsung success?
Well, bottom line is anytime you have one death from a storm, it's a death too many, and we work around the clock to prevent that every day. You know, I can't speak for the president, but I know that FEMA put 100% into Puerto Rico, and these people back here are incredibly dedicated. They work around the clock, and they get stepped on all the time. Bottom line is that I know and they know we kept Puerto Rico from total collapse as a result of Maria. And any time that FEMA goes into an event and we're the first responder and only responder for many months, that's not a desirable situation. So what are we doing to fix that? What the nation needs to understand is that we're building the backbone of emergency management for the Commonwealth, for the 78 municipalities. FEMA is now one of the largest employers in Puerto Rico. We've hired over 1,800 people. And we have to build that capability along with the Commonwealth. But here's the conversation that needs to occur. It needs to occur in Congress. It needs to occur across the United States. If FEMA is going to put $50 billion into Puerto Rico, and some of the estimates are that the federal government's going to put an additional $120 billion into Puerto Rico, what's the future of Puerto Rico? What should it look like? How do we redesign it to be more resilient, economically viable? And how do we make sure that the infrastructure, such as one of the oldest power grids in the country, is not allowed to rot and decay, which, you know, when an infrastructure is not working, it leads to more deaths. And there's a big discrepancy between direct deaths of how people died from the wind or the water or buildings collapse versus the long-term secondary or indirect deaths that occurred over a 6-month period. And a lot of that can be tied to a very weak infrastructure that we work around the clock in Puerto Rico to fix. And the governor knows that, and many of the municipalities understand that too. And if you want a true story, go talk to some of the 1,800 Puerto Ricans that we've hired to be part of this team to build a new future for Puerto Rico.
Well, we've had teams down there nonstop, Gabe Gutierrez and a lot of others. But the fact is, just as after Katrina, where there was terrible infrastructure in parts of New Orleans, that is a federal responsibility. These are American citizens.
No, you're actually wrong on that. It's not a federal responsibility to upkeep the infrastructure. Actually, most of the infrastructure in this company is owned by the private sector. FEMA doesn't control the maintenance of the infrastructure. And if you remember, when I went back for the third supplemental after Congress, I had to ask for special authorities. It's never been done before to fix the deferred maintenance or the infrastructure that was allowed to rot.
But the emergency rescue is the federal responsibility, is the point I'm trying to make. Let me ask you about red tape, because after all of this tragedy, people in Puerto Rico we've now discovered only 75, as of July 30th, only 75 of 2,341 requests for emergency funeral assistance for Puerto Ricans was approved because of red tape, because they needed approvals from state officials when they, for months and months, didn't even have electricity or communications. Is there any way to clear up that kind of red tape?
I'm sorry, ma'am. You know, when it came to the amount of food, water, and commodities that we put on the island, we put over $2 billion worth of commodities into Puerto Rico. But here again, when it comes back to who actually runs the food chains, it's the major grocers. There's all kinds of things, and what we need to do is make sure, like what we did with Hurricane Lane in Hawaii, we're reaching out to grocery stores, we're reaching out to the major retail providers to understand what they have on island versus what we need to backfill, because again, this is a partnership. If anybody is depending on FEMA to be the sole responder and the only responder, that's not right, and that's what we're trying to correct. And with Puerto Rico, the amount of money and the effort that's being put into Puerto Rico, it's going to be a wonderful place, and that's, we're absolutely working every day to make Puerto Rico resilient and economically viable.
And the FEMA death benefits?
The FEMA death benefit? I'm sorry.
Benefits. The funeral benefits.
So we do provide funeral benefits, and we're happy to offer up those numbers. When it comes to the exact number, I don't know the exact number, but it's quite a bit. And but here's the thing too: when it comes to the indirect deaths, not caused by the wind or the water or building collapses or whatever it may be, the indirect deaths for any event are typically greater in many cases. If you look at the 2004 hurricanes in Florida, for example, 4 storms in 6 weeks, you had people that died after the storm passed because they fell off their roof trying to make repairs. They died in car crashes because the stoplights were off. You have chainsaw accidents. You have accidents with people cleaning up debris.
Sure, and people couldn't get medical help. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have dialysis machines. No, all of those things take place.
Yeah, so it's a question for HHS. It's a question of why the 67 hospitals inside Puerto Rico had no plans. They were not mitigated. They were not resilient. And now FEMA, what we are, is a granting agency authority. That the money that we're going to be putting back in is to hopefully fix those hospital systems to keep that from happening. But here again, it's more than FEMA. FEMA is not all things to all people or all parts of the infrastructure. And so that's what we have to have an honest conversation about. This is a partnership.
When you deal with OMB, with the budget folks, do you have any say when they take $10 million? And I'll grant you, let's stipulate, you've spent billions and billions, billions of dollars, rather, in Puerto Rico and for the rest of the storm recovery. But when $10 million is taken out of the FEMA budget and reallocated to ICE for detention facilities, right before the hurricane season, those questions are being asked right now in the appropriations committees by Democratic senators.
Right now, that money has nothing to do with what you see behind us. It does not pay for this response. It is not coming out of the Disaster Relief Fund. It has no impact on our efforts to be prepared for Hurricane Florence. It's just, unfortunately, we have a congressman that is playing politics on the back of Florence. There's no story there.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.